sore fingers, the melody lingers. First tune, beaming smile, feel the style. Calloused hands, stiff wrist, getting the gist. First riff, eyes wide, glowing
So with Streetcoins, we say that it's not what you've done, it's what you can become. We use arts to help facilitate that road to change.
Like a dream from a wishing well, my trawler eyes take everything in while I'm walking down the snake path, like a hypnotist under a spell. Sadness, disconnection from madness, I leap from the noise, relief in the shadows, crying out for more, like a hungry child full of life. Hand of smiles, blown away like the flame of a candle out again, deafened by silence, fragile and lonesome again. A break from the sadness, disconnection from
Hello, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us. My name is Adam Robertson. I'm one of the Streetcoins facilitators who have the privilege of delivering our Road to Change workshops. We spent 12 weeks with a group of participants who were referred to us by Aberdeenshire Unpaid Work. So for those of you who don't know us, Streetcoins are a charity who use the arts and creativity to help people achieve more positive outcomes. The idea behind Road to Change is that we give participants an opportunity to do some fairly deep self-awareness and exploration type work. The space that we create is a safe one, it's non-triggering, and we use fiction as a safety net, tapping into their creativity. Often they consider themselves not to be creative, but we know from experience that that's simply not the case. We're all creative. This group, like all of our groups, started week one with a blank page. Supported by our facilitators, they devised fictional characters and story worlds while exploring various themes that grew organically from the sessions. And one of the themes explored by this group was gambling harms. Now, these end of module events have become an opportunity for local authorities to show the local and wider community what they are doing with community sentences. But they've also become an opportunity for people on unpaid work to raise awareness around important themes like gambling harms. Now, our workshops operate under a range of safeguarding guidelines, one of which we refer to as the privileged environment. This basically means the sessions are anonymous and participants use first names only. We ask that no personal details are shared. Now, in a moment, you'll be shown a short showcase film from a read-through of their script, which was delivered by volunteers from the group. Afterwards, we'll have a Q&A with our panel, who I'll introduce you to. You can start submitting any questions that you have in the comment section here on YouTube. You'll need to be logged into a YouTube account to post a comment. You can also post questions in Streetcoins Facebook page. On Twitter, you can tag us at Streetcoins, or by email directly to my colleague in the back office there, Mark McNichol, mark@streetcoins.org. Okay, so any questions, Mark at Streetcoins, or use those channels. Now, the short film and the Q&A will take around an hour, and we should be done by kind of 2:30 at the latest. So without further ado, it's my absolute pleasure to introduce Aberdeenshire's unpaid work group, Road to Change group, and we'll have a look at that film.
I found myself in a bit of a tight spot.
What kind of spot?
I'm in the red.
How much?
£2,000.
Is that it?
What do you mean, is that it? It's £2,000, mate.
Shut up, it's sorted. I'll give it to you tomorrow. But one condition, you're at this in the heat.
What?
Seriously, the gambling. Your dad up the back. You don't take gear, so it's not that.
Can't get nothing past you, eh?
Not in my city.
Is Brian there?
Nope.
What do you mean?
He's not here.
Okay, can you tell him to call me back then?
Can't.
What do you mean, can't?
Simple. Can't you ask a deed person to call you back? Or anyone, for that matter.
Deed? Fuck off. Put Brian on, mate.
He's deed, mate. What are you no understanding?
I can't believe it.
Well, believe it, mate, because it's as real as it gets.
Me and him had an arrangement, and I was due to pay him back at the end of the week.
The arrangement's changed, hasn't it? He's dead, so now I'm running things, and you owe money that I'm calling to collect.
Look, I'm so sorry. It wasn't meant to be like this. I've been gambling and it got really bad. I found myself in a lot of debt, then I bumped into Brian and he gave me the money to clear it. The only reason he gave it to me was because I agreed to knock him on the head and go to meetings. Look, honestly, I haven't gambled for 4 months.
Why were you gambling anyway? You know the problems your dad had.
I miss him. I found myself going to the bookies just to feel close to him. When I try and picture him in my mind, I can't, but in the bookies and all his old pals there, and I felt like he was too.
You need to go to the police.
What can you tell me about this man?
He's been making my life hell.
How so?
Basically, he says I owed Brian £6,000 and that I've got to pay it by Friday. He's threatened my family, he's put a fake petrol bomb on my doorstep that my mum found, and he went to my sister's house. I've not been in the bookies or gambled for 18 months now. John got life with a minimum tariff of 23 years because he admitted killing Brian. The police got it all by placing a recording device on me, so we don't have to worry about him. When my boss found out, ironically he says to me, "Why didn't you just come to me?" I still have my job, miraculously. My family are safe, that's the main thing. and we're all good. They're supporting me. They know it's one day at a time, and I'm incredibly grateful for that.
I had quite a bad addiction in my life, so I could relate to that, and I know people that's gambled and stuff, and it was very easy for me to slip into his shoes, to be honest with you. So I think what happened at the end there, how he turned it around, that happens in real life, not all the time, but it does happen. So I think it's good, and also if somebody has no clue about that life, it gives them a good insight into it as well. So I think it's a good thing. But no, it was easy enough for me to do, and I enjoyed it.
The first session, really, I always ask the same thing, and I kind of, as always, a fictional capacity. How could someone end up finding themselves with a CPO? It affects people from all walks of life. Nobody's kind of immune to it, and that kind of just leads into a conversation. And basically, we kind of go from there. Once we kind of even get one small kind of seed that's planted, I tend to like to kind of go, right, okay, we'll get two characters, so let's throw them into a situation and improvise, because a lot of the language that was in that script came from the improvisations. It's natural conversation, and also we're thinking off the cuff. So for a writer, you could sit in an empty room and try and imagine up these conversations, but when you're hearing it from the horse's mouth, it makes all the difference.
It's being able to relate to the story, and being able to rethink how you can move on from after you've finished your CPO. So it just knowing that, like, whatever we done to be here, it was wrong, and be able to rethink what will we move on from our experiences and be able to make a better future.
It never fails to amaze me, really, in all honesty. The more that I have sat in through the work that Streetcoins do, just seeing the confidence of the individuals that we nominate to put forward, and kind of usually they come with some resistance at the beginning, in all honesty, when we're trying to pitch this idea to participants to engage in the Streetcoins process as part of their unpaid work requirements. There's, I think, a lot of anxiety and a lot of uncertainty, and people don't know what they're getting involved in. But fast forward a few short weeks later, and then you see the confidence in the candidates and the individuals and how they really come out of their shells. And it's maybe not traditional unpaid work in the sense like mainstream society would expect people would be doing, but the premise behind it is always to reduce the risk of further offending. And coming from that standpoint, if we can increase people's confidence, increase their self-esteem and their self-worth, then hopefully they will go on to live far more productive and pro-social lives and reduce that risks of reoffending. And that certainly seems to be the case with the people that we kind of nominate and complete the Streetcoins course. The benefits of it are kind of really unmeasurable in many senses.
Doing the traditional community service, obviously, I think this was more challenging. Obviously, not in a physical way, but in a way to obviously gain confidence. And in general, I think it just makes you more. You can express more and things like that. And a lot of repeat offenders don't know how to express their feelings. I know that from experience. They tend to bottle things up. So being able to come and talk to strangers, let alone do like a small film thing, is a huge help to anyone. And I've learned a great deal from it, definitely.
This is probably the third or the fourth session I've done, and it really did help me, and it's gonna use the confidence that I gained from it to be able to move on in future.
It's a good point you make about how vulnerable it is being on calls like this, and especially after everything that we've all been through in these last couple of years, that kind of anxiety and isolation, it's something that's affected us all, definitely.
I didn't realise I had so much in my head, so much ideas and stuff, and creativity, as you say, and some of the exercises really got me going.
It's good to get through your hours, and like I'm quite busy through the week, so it's kind of like hard to actually be able to attend the workshops. So it's good to have Streetcoins to be able to do my hours and be able to gain something from it.
When it was presented to me, I thought, well, I'm not sure about this, and but the further, well, what I would say to anyone is give it a go, and I think it truly anyone can do it. If I could do it, then anyone can do it. You will learn, and I think you'll be able to express yourself a lot more and find areas of your own self that you didn't know was there. And that's what happened with me. So it's definitely worth doing. And even if you don't like it, just stick with the program and see it till the end. And the sense of achievement is well worth it.
Hello, welcome back. Thanks for staying with us during that film. Now, remember to submit any questions in the comments box on YouTube, Streetcoins Facebook page, or Twitter at Streetcoins, or remember you can email them directly to mark@streetcoins.org. So before we make a start in the Q&A, I'd like to invite a familiar face to those of you who have attended our previous Aberdeenshire streams. Darren Bruce, Police Scotland Inspector, to say a few short words on behalf of Aberdeenshire's Community Justice Partnership. So Darren, welcome. I know you've been having some... There you are.
Thanks, Mark, and thanks, folks, for joining this afternoon. You know, I think you'll all agree with me that we've just seen a real personal insight into the journey that the participants have come on through the Streetcoins programme. And, you know, Craig touched upon it when he was given his narrative within the piece. It is so important that, you know, we have adapted how we deliver community-based sentences during the COVID period. And what Craig had said that rung a chord with me, we're giving something to the people who can take a new skill away. You know, hear about the confidence that the participants are getting. You know, and I'm relating to one of the participants who, before the programme, found it really hard to speak about how he was feeling, his feelings. And this is hugely important as a tool to help address some of the underlying things that can often lead us or be a catalyst towards offending. So, you know, I'm only going to say a short few words, and I'm sure you will agree that it's a pretty powerful piece. And I'll pass straight on to the panel. We'll take some questions. Thanks, folks.
Okay, so I'll introduce, thanks Darren, I'll introduce the rest of the panel. So we've got Martin Paterson here, who has lived experience of both gambling harms and the justice system. Martin was also involved in the excellent short film I was able to watch this morning called One Last Spin, and the trailer is coming up right now.
I think once you've crossed that invisible line, it's not then about the money or the winning. I think it's the chasing of what you've just lost. So it does become quite a dark, vicious circle.
I just didn't understand why gambling had got me to the stage that I would do anything to fund gambling, and that meant hurting family, friends, whatever.
It's only self-harm. What's the problem? Like, you know what I mean? And he goes, no, you don't understand. Life's at stake. And that was it then. And our world fell apart.
The memory I've got is of my son. He never lived with his dad ever again. You know, he would cry for weeks on end because he couldn't understand why we couldn't go home. He wanted to go home.
Okay, so that is a really terrific film, and I recommend that you all check that film out on onelastspin.vision. Now, thanks for joining us, Martin. It's a really powerful film, and we're going to get more into that film during the Q&A. But yeah, so anyone wanting to find out about that film or show how they can support the longer version of that film, please go to onelastspin.vision. There's links and additional information on that site as well. So next we've got Georgina Charlton, who is the Gambling Harms Programme Manager from Health and Social Care Alliance Scotland. Hi Georgina, thanks for joining us.
Hi Adam, thanks for having me.
And we've also got some more familiar faces from Aberdeenshire Unpaid Work. We've got Craig McGrory and we've got Kirsty Milne. Hi folks, thanks for joining us.
Hi Adam, good afternoon everyone.
So guys, would you just like to just take a moment and just introduce yourselves? I mean, Martin, as I introduced you first, could I just ask you about the film, like how it came about?
Yeah, thanks Adam. Thanks for having me on, and Mark from Streetcoins. The film came about basically as a de-glamorisation of gambling, because all we ever see is how glamorous it is on adverts, football, all other sorts of sport. Well, last night the snooker was saturated with Betfred, so we tried to show a side of what it was like for the affected others, especially our families, our friends, the people that get affected by gambling. And it's such an isolated addiction that it's pretty hard to explain to people. There's so much misunderstanding about it. So we decided to turn a 3-minute advert into a 30-minute documentary with the networking and the people that we knew who believed what we were saying, that it wasn't all our own fault. And we decided to put the film together, and it's been a great experience. As Shaun touched on earlier, it's fantastic to be involved in any sort of art, especially where we all come from. But art, music, whatever it may be, it's a fantastic platform, and the more platforms that are available for people who are in recovery, discovery, or whatever it may be, the better. And showing somebody is a lot easier than trying to explain it. That's the road we went down.
I think the film does that really, really well. It really hits home. It's very powerful, and it really clarifies the kind of invisible harm that gambling does. You know, we're all really aware of the harms of drugs and alcohol and substance, but the film makes clear that because it's a leisure activity, we see it as something people choose to do. Georgina, what's your involvement in the film, or how have you been able to use the film or support Martin?
So we've been lucky enough to have moderately supported Martin and Adrian in their endeavours to create the film. I mean, really all the creative ideas came from them, and that's where the credit lies. But the work that we do in the Scotland Reducing Gambling Harms programme is all about getting the voice of people who have been affected, who have been impacted by gambling and gambling harms at the forefront of change. And such a huge aspect of that is raising awareness and is creating conversations in communities, in families, between friends around, you know, what is the harm that gambling can do? How are people impacted by it? What needs to change? How can we all become a bit more confident to have conversations like this with one another in a safe way, to recognise signs and symptoms within friends and within our communities, and to know where to go forward and take those conversations forward when they're needed to be. So, I mean, the film, it really captures, and it's amazing capturing what that real experience is and showcasing real life impacts that have happened to real people and are so beautifully illustrated. And just from having been a part of some of the screenings and showings that have happened, the discussion that's stimulated as a part of that and after that is so rich. And I think, you know, the film that we've just watched here today, that's such a key part of it as well, that insight. This is a conversation, a theme that's emerged from a group of people who didn't specifically come together to speak about gambling, but that's just come out of their communal experiences. And I think if there was kind of one message that I've really taken away from my work with people from this film, from One Last Spin, it is how much gambling can affect so many different aspects of people's lives, their relationships, their health, their finances, mental health, a really key part of that. And yeah, just as a final thought from me, I really thought in this film today the hope at the end. The recovery absolutely is possible with, you know, supportive family structures that was mentioned, with understanding and supportive employers, with a system and a society that sits around us that understands how harmful this can be, but creates mechanisms to make sure that people are supported in that harm's prevented, but that when it happens, people are able to get better.
Yeah. Could I just as well, before we drill really down into the questions that are starting to come through, just a reminder for everyone who's watching, do get those questions through to us. mark@streetcoins.org or @streetcoins on Twitter, Facebook or YouTube. So if we could just, if I could go to yourself, Craig, Unpaid Work, Aberdeenshire, and if you could just introduce yourself and talk about a little bit about your involvement in the project.
Yeah, thank you, Adam. Like you said, my name's Craig McGrory, and I am, excuse me, I am a team manager of the Unpaid Work service in North Aberdeenshire, and then my kind of counterpart and colleague Kirsty covers South and Central Aberdeenshire. So really, we've been running Streetcoins. I think this must be about the third or fourth cycle that we went through with our people subject to unpaid work requirements. And it really came to be, as was already been discussed, through the kind of COVID measures and lockdown measures, where we were not able to take people out in the more conventional ways to complete their unpaid work, be that out and about in the community or working in our workshops, completing tasks. So kind of this came along, and it sounded like a great idea for, I think I said it previously in that video clip we just seen, it's maybe not the traditional way that the members of society or the general public would expect unpaid work to be completed, and it's certainly maybe not what people would expect unpaid work is. But the benefits of it kind of appear to be really, really good from the feedback that we've had from our participants that have went through the program, that kind of things that are kind of very difficult to measure in terms of feeding back to the Scottish Government or feeding back to the court and the judiciary about the success of unpaid work, more around kind of confidence and self-esteem and self-worth and kind of these areas of people's lives that are able to kind of be supported and facilitated through participating in Streetcoins. Maybe moving a bit away from kind of traditionally, it would be how many picnic tables have you sanded and varnished, or how many bags of rubbish have you picked up, things that we could kind of measure and feedback. Whereas it's kind of a completely different way of still targeting rates of reoffending. Obviously, what unpaid work is all about is paying back to the local community and reducing the risks of further offending behaviour. And I personally feel that Streetcoins kind of ticks all them boxes and supports Aberdeenshire Council to achieve them targets.
Yeah, brilliant. And Kirsty, can we hear from yourself as well? If you could introduce yourself, tell us a bit about your background involvement with the project.
Okay, thanks, Adam. So I'm Kirsty Milne. I'm the team manager, like Craig said, for the South and Central unpaid work team in Aberdeenshire. And again, I've been involved in the Streetcoins project from the first run we did through to this now being the third run. And it's, I'm always amazed at, how the participants grow and develop from start to finish of doing their projects. They seem to put so much effort and energy into it, and they all come back with very, very positive feedback, which I think is proof in itself that this is a program that kind of works for people. There is that, like Craig said in the clip earlier, that there's often a lot of some question and uncertainty about people becoming involved in a project that we try and sell as like an art related project. However, when they get to meet the team and they start creating the scripts, it just seems to sort of naturally flow and progress, and then they manage to create these really good pieces of work at the end of it. And yes, I agree that a lot, people in the general community maybe wouldn't always agree with that being, traditional unpaid work methods. However, we as a service notice a big, change in people that participate in this program in terms of their confidence and I guess generally what they learn from working with each other doing the project, and how that helps them develop a sense of everybody else round about them as well. And I personally think it helps people see life slightly differently and see it from both sides, and that in itself is likely to help them reduce the risk of further offending. So I feel it's a really positive project for us to continue with.
Yeah. I mean, that is something that's come up, isn't it, in various... We run these courses, these Road to Change projects with half of the local authorities around Scotland, and having made films about community payback orders, etc., we've discovered along the way that there's a public perception that if you're building picnic benches, painting fences, or picking up litter, that's valuable, and this kind of work isn't as valuable, and the evidence runs contrary to that, because you're talking about rehabilitating people, and we've always said another metaphor for the kind of work we do is this is picking up the litter of the mind.
I think we're very much looking at it being, qualitative data rather than quantitative, in that, we're maybe not getting through as many unpaid work hours as we would want to throughout the whole of the COVID restrictions. However, what we're seeing is a much more robust way of working with people in terms of what we can offer them in supports and encouragement, and just giving them different opportunities, and that I feel has been quite a positive thing. And everybody that's participated in any of the groups so far have always had nothing but positive feedback from what they've taken from it. And it looks like the participants, from this project as well, have really enjoyed it and put a lot of effort into it. So that in itself is very valuable for everybody in the community.
Absolutely. So we've got comments and questions coming through now. So some comments first. One here from Stacey Murdoch. This is what rehabilitation should be about: supporting people to understand themselves better and find new interests and opportunities. Well done to Aberdeenshire and everyone involved. We've got a one here that was emailed through from Norman. Absolutely brilliant. Well done to everyone involved. I'd like to hear from the unpaid work staff and how they feel this type of work compares to the more traditional types of unpaid work. I suppose we did just cover that. Both yourselves answered that. We've got a question here from Mark Conway. Again, it's for unpaid work. Can I ask Darren, does Justice Social Work ever ask people on community sentences about their gambling and the role it played in their offending? So that's, I suppose, a question we can ask to the panel. But Darren, if you're still with us, I know you were having some technicals, but if you could weigh in on that one.
Thanks, Mark. I'm hoping you're hearing me, but I think it's a really good question to ask. And actually, it was something I touched upon with Martin just last week. This piece and obviously Martin's work has made us as a service locally examine what are we doing to support people who we find with gambling addiction. And the answer would have to be, in the meantime, I don't think we've got as rich an understanding as we could have, and it's something that we would aim through our connections with Martin and I to go and explore. Although that said, I would say we're very good at trying to identify, the underlying cause of where somebody might be offending. So with that in mind, if we are hearing that gambling is an underlying issue, of course we're going to flag it forward so that some sort of remedy could be put in place in the future to try and address it. But certainly, coming back round to answer it in short, it's something we need to develop and something that we're going to get better at.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Craig and Kirsty, Mark's kind of developed that question a bit further, and he asks, currently gambling does not feature as a requirement that a community payback order can contain, unlike drug or alcohol or mental health treatments. What can be done to change this? Craig or Kirsty, which you'd like to go on that one?
Yeah, I can. I mean, what can be done to change this? It would take a change in legislation and a change in policy via the Scottish Government if they were thinking of making it a treatment requirement. Quite rightly identified that we already have a drug and alcohol treatment requirements, and we already have mental health treatment requirements. Perhaps gambling is not at the forefront of kind of I suppose policy certainly at the moment is kind of very driven towards substance misuse, and there's kind of lots of work going on across our partnership and the rest of Scotland around drug-related deaths and substance misuse problems. And I'm sure gambling is out there under the surface. It's maybe just not in people's awareness like other substances and other addiction issues are at this moment in time. So I'd like to think that as a service, though, every single person that is given unpaid work goes through an induction process when they first come to our service, and part of that induction is that we do ask them about addictions, and gambling would very much be part of that kind of induction process. And if it was identified there was issues with gambling, then we would certainly be referring on to kind of additional services or signposting on to the appropriate kind of resources within our local communities to gain support. So it's maybe not something that as an unpaid work service we would actually be able to address ourselves, but we certainly would be referring on to appropriate partner agencies who could give support.
Yeah. Is there anything you'd like to add to that, Kirsty? Oh, you're on mute. You're on mute. You made this mistake I make every day.
Right, sorry. I should be used to this after 2 years of lockdown.
We all should, but we all do it.
Yeah, I guess what we would recognise as being, I cover some of the fieldwork team as well, so work with some of the social workers who are very much involved in our service users as well. And part of our contact with people is to find out what issues they do have in their life, and if there is anywhere where we can fit into that to support them address that, if that's what they're looking to do. And I guess it's recognising as well the further difficulties that can come alongside gambling. There's the risks from other people who they then owe money to, and the impact of that on families and the other things that were identified within the clip. Is that it's not just the person that's affected, it's everybody round about them too. So it's helping them recognise that and looking at, like Craig says, other services that can perhaps support them locally for these issues, because it has a huge impact on people's own mental health and their well-being, and it would impact on sometimes their ability to come out in a traditional unpaid work party because of additional fears that might be there of who they walk into out in the community. So we have to have an awareness of these things so that we know what areas we need to support people with.
Yeah. I've got a question here for Darren by email. Kathleen, she's keen to hear, Martin, whether you've got any advice for people around how to start that conversation with someone who you're concerned about, where you think gambling's becoming an issue. What advice would you have on that?
It's hard to give anybody advice about anything really, unless they're listening and want to hear any advice. And the advice I would give anybody who's thinking about they might have a problem or in any sort of denial, that gambling is not all your own fault. Any addiction, I believe, isn't all your own fault. And once I found out what was going on in my head regarding dopamine and hits and misses and the near miss, I didn't understand any of it. I just didn't understand why my mind and my brain was acting so irrationally. I would, as I've said in the film, that I would do anything. And as Shaun touched on, the people it's affected, his sister, his mum, his friends, and having to wear a wire, and these things happen in real life, and that's not easy circumstances to be in, having to wear a wire and all these kind of things because you've had to go to a money lender or whatever it may be. But my advice would be you might have a drink issue or a drug issue, and gambling's there as well, and to understand it's not all your own fault. And there's Gamblers Anonymous, Alcoholics Anonymous, and Streetcoins and the Alliance, and there's more and more people coming to the table to realise that they're all the same. They might taste different, but they're all the same. And this is a mental health issue, especially in Scotland. It's not recognised as such. If I go to my GP, he doesn't know what I'm talking about when I talk about gambling addiction, and that's not any fault of the GP. And the GP will tell you he's not been trained up on it. And as I said, the more people that we can get to the table or conferences like this and debates that gambling is an issue as well, and to encourage them very difficult with stigma and shame and guilt that, to a certain extent. But I think once they take that first step, they'll realise that there is a better way. And what better way than people who are maybe having to rattle down some hours than being creative, because they can take away anything, but they can't take away our imagination, no matter what it is and no matter what way we do it. We've got an imagination, and that's what everybody's involved here today have showed us, that we can do it, anybody can do it, and we support and platforms, and more people coming to the table to talk about it, the better it will be. And legislation's going to be coming out soon, white paper, which maybe remove the adverts, the sponsorship, and take a public health approach to gambling.
Yeah.
That's what we're looking for, and that's why we're here. We're raising awareness and telling people that it isn't all their own fault, and stick your hand up and say, I might have a problem.
Yeah, I mean, that's a question that I might be able to direct towards yourself, Georgina. It's to both Martin and Georgina, this question, but maybe you can answer it, Georgina. That I've got somebody here saying that I haven't spoken to anyone yet. I'll keep their name out of the question, but I haven't spoken to anyone. But I do feel that my gambling is getting a bit out of hand. I feel ashamed and I don't want to speak to family or friends. Where should I go to speak to someone in confidence? And thanks to Martin and Georgina for taking part in this. So, Georgina, perhaps that's one you can lead on, but Martin, you can come in on that as well. There's somebody there who feels that it's getting out of hand. So they've got that awareness beginning, that dawning awareness, but where can they be encouraged to go to now?
Well, the first place I would tell anybody is Gamblers Anonymous, because that's more available than anything else in Scotland, especially Scotland. And you'll be made more than welcome to, and it's strangers, and you'll feel you're not alone. It's the same as any group therapy, whatever it may be. But Gamblers Anonymous is the place to go and share your feelings with strangers or whoever it may be, and go for it. I would encourage anybody to go for it. If they're even thinking about it, then there must be issues there. So before it gets any worse or any better, whatever it may be, I would go to Gamblers Anonymous and pick up the phone to Gamblers Anonymous helpline, and they'll direct you to a local meeting. And if you don't want to be local, you can jump on a bus, and dealing with the shame and stigma, it won't be as bad once you go for help and let people know that you're struggling.
Yeah, I would completely agree. I think even having sent that email through today is such a first step to starting that conversation and that self-recognition, and that shame that individual's spoken about. That is something that we hear so commonly from people who have been affected and impacted by this, and it is misplaced. You do not need to feel ashamed. This is hidden, it is often stigmatized, but these conversations do need to happen, and reaching out for that help and support. So Martin's mentioned Gamblers Anonymous. There's also, and GamCare, they have a national helpline you might be able to get in touch with, well, will be able to get in touch with. There's also often local community supports. Cope Scotland have put together a toolkit that brings together, it's quite Glasgow focused, so it might depend on your sort of local geography, but I can find and share a link for that in the chat, that brings together a lot of different local community supports. The RCA Trust do work. So there's a number of different organisations you can reach out to. But I think, those conversations with families and friends, I do hear from people that when you start that, incredibly difficult as it is such a positive first step to take. But obviously that depends on people's own particular context. And thank you for asking, and I'll post some more in the chat as well.
That'd be great. Yeah, all the links, and for anyone's watching and concerned, the links that were shared at the end of the film, this whole live stream will exist on our YouTube page that can be accessed, Streetcoins YouTube, or via the streetcoins.org website, so you can get the links that you need. But an extension of that question, Georgina, you might want to come in on this, but I'll also ask, I'll see if Kirsty or Craig want to come in on it as well, but what should the Scottish Government be doing with preventative legislation? Do they need to do more, or is this area reserved to Westminster? Do we know enough about the legislative side of it?
So, well, first of all, I would say we do need to be doing more. I think we're really not doing anything virtually at this point in time. You know, there are a few projects that work within prevention and education which do excellent work in Scotland, but they are localised. It's not at a national level, and it's not integrated across the many different sectors which we've mentioned. So, for example, there are pockets of great work like this happening within criminal justice that's link into social work, that link into housing, that link into health and social care, but it is not a national picture currently. So there is, you know, the issue that the regulation of gambling is held at Westminster level. As Martin's mentioned, there is a review coming out shortly which may be changing that kind of landscape of what regulation exists, what's allowed to be done and what's not allowed to be done. But there are powers at a level which can be used. So particularly health and social care, that is devolved. So treatment and support within England, there are NHS clinics. There isn't something comparable to that in Scotland currently. And the vast majority of treatment and support that is available is funded via Gamble Aware within Scotland, which there are kind of different opinions on the delivery of. And but there isn't a comprehensive treatment and support offer across Scotland. And also within prevention and education, as I said, we need to raise awareness. There needs to be conversations really across the public. So within schools, within work, we hear about the impact on people's employment or employment uncertainty, where they feel that they can't raise if they're having an issue with gambling or concerns around it because of concerns in their employment status. We need to have conversations around, you know, links to gender-based violence and conversations around different equality groups and equality communities and how they're impacted or impacted differently. So particularly women, particular people from different cultural, ethnic minority or religious communities, and also particularly young people who can have quite unique experiences. So essentially, we all need to be having conversations, especially the awareness of kind of frontline health practitioners. And as someone once raised, we need to be educating the industry. So the onus shouldn't just be on us as individuals and people within the public. The industry needs to do better, and they need to educate themselves in terms of what is, apologies, there's a beep behind me. The industry needs to educate themselves in terms of the real life impact of some of the processes that they have in place, how they are impacting and hurting people, and what they need to do to change. So, and also there are kind of licensing abilities held at a local authority level, which can look into some of the differences that we see between more deprived and less deprived communities, and the increased amount of licensed bookmakers within them. And so that all needs to be addressed, and that is, you know, that is within Scottish power to look at some of those as they're doing. So yes, there is definitely scope to be doing more, and fundamental to all of it is bringing in the people who have been affected, the people who have experienced it, because only they hold the expertise of what is working but what needs to change.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Brilliant. I'll come to you, Kirsty, next. We may all have a very similar answer to this, but I want to give everyone a chance to speak. What do you feel are the Scottish Government doing enough, or what would you like to see more of them doing?
I guess what I would like to see kind of change of in terms of gambling addiction is that on the telly, I think we're all very aware of adverts that relate to people with drug addiction and alcohol addiction and the negative impact that can have on people's lives. It's very well portrayed in some of the campaigns that run on TV. Whereas with gambling, it's all very glamorized and happy and fun, and get together with your friends and gamble, and it's all made to be very positive and something that you'll enjoy, whereas that's actually not the reality of it. And it doesn't, there's nothing I can think of that kind of would indicate that gambling can ruin lives. And I think there needs to be a double portrayal of it, that, you know, yes, you can do this, but this could be a consequence of it for you and many others around you, but they don't tend to show that. So that's what I would like to see change.
It's a hard one, isn't it? You know, if you were to supplant the gambling adverts for, I don't know, say heroin or something like that, you know, and it was like, hey, come and, you know, it would, it'd have,
there'd be public outcry, wouldn't there?
public outcry, but yeah, it's fine. And footballers can go around wearing gambling sponsored T-shirts, and people can be encouraged to take part, and like it's almost like it's a family sport, you know, and it's far from that. Craig, I don't know if there's anything you want to come in on that. The Scottish Government you'd like to see do more. What would it be?
Yeah, I kind of quite agree, and kind of very similar to, I suppose, tobacco advertising when it was banned kind of many years ago, that you're no longer seeing Formula One cars driving around the track with kind of cigarette branding all over them. And I think the rates of kind of cigarette use has kind of definitely kind of declined over the years, and it's kind of not in the public eye as much. So I would like to think that kind of similar strategies to kind of gambling could be effective. Although I still think kind of certainly in rural Aberdeenshire and not living in a kind of main urban environment, certainly access to resources is problematic across some areas in Aberdeenshire. Our larger town centres kind of are probably better at kind of being able to kind of target kind of various resources and kind of interventions, but certainly out and about in more rural areas of Aberdeenshire, there would be very little support, such as to get into the city centre for a Gamblers Anonymous meeting. You may be talking a 3-hour bus trip, kind of 3 hours in and 3 hours back, and having to change twice on the bus to get into the city. So I think that's always a problem that we face, kind of living in quite a kind of rural, kind of local authority area.
Yeah.
But yeah, if I could change one thing, I suppose it would be kind of more resources, and kind of obviously we require more money to kind of provide more resources. So that's kind of always the bugbear.
And we've got a question here which ties into the question we've just been answering, is, are the bookmakers doing enough? And how can we get them to do more? I suppose that's a tricky one, isn't it? I mean, Martin, do you want to speak about that? Like the bookies, what can they do? Are they doing enough, and how can they be made to do more?
Once you realise that the bookies is an industry and they're out there to make money at all costs, that's what they're all about, and that's fair enough. My point would be they could do so much better, and especially when you're gambling on roulette or an algorithm or whatever it may be. I mean, we're not anti-gambling, me and fellow campaigners, we're not anti-gambling. People have go out and enjoy themselves with a few bets here and there. But we're talking about limits. I've got a friend who lost £132,000 in 2 days. I mean, that shouldn't be contemplated. That shouldn't be allowed. There should be limits, especially when you're gambling on a machine. We're asking for limits to be set. We're asking, as Neil had said, about a public health approach. Tobacco is no longer visible. If you want a cigarette, you go behind a counter and get it, and that's fair enough. We would like the same with gambling. We'd like it removed from TV, from sponsorship, the de-glamorising, especially in football. Celtic, Rangers, all the big teams, Aberdeen, well, I'm not sure about Aberdeen, but Celtic and Rangers, the two biggest clubs in Scotland, have got Daffabet and Unibet all over it, and kids see that, they think it's normal, and a lot of them do think it's normal until they get into trouble. And if you can lose your salary, a month's salary in 5 minutes, that's not right. And if they removed all that and put a levy on some of the winnings, some of the hard money we call it, they make billions, and they advertise. Last year it was like 1.5 billion on advertising by celebrities, kids heroes, ex-footballers. And if that was all removed, that would be a great start. And if the white paper brings in limits on state, that'd be great. As I said, we're not anti-gambling. People go and enjoy themselves at the dogs or racing or whatever it may be. But we need tighter regulation, and that's all we're asking for. And some recognition that people do need help, especially in Scotland.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I mean, there needs to be some fairly hefty restrictions coming in. I won't say what area, but an area not within a short distance of Glasgow. I had a workshop up there recently, and after the pandemic, obviously, there's town centres have been hollowed out to some degree. The shops that have closed, but in one small precincted area, there was most shops shut down, and there was 3 betting shops, but almost next door to each other. So in terms of like targeting a particular community, a particular economic sector, if you like, I just thought that, that at a local authority level, even you would think, no, we have to have limits on the amount of shops that can operate in an
I'll
area.
give you a quick example of that, Adam. Where I'm from, with a population of 44,000, I think it is, there's 22 bookmakers, there's 2 bingo halls, and there's 2 amusement arcades. A couple of miles down the road in Mulgai, which is the other side of Glasgow, there's 1 bookmaker. And that's what drew my attention to it in the first place, the clustering. And every bookie's had 4 machines, which was known as an FOBT machine, a fixed odds betting terminal. And that's where people were coming into horrendous troubles and getting enticed in with free bets, free spins. And once we take away the so-called free bet, which doesn't exist, and touching on something earlier on, that when you go to your GP and they don't know nothing, they can't help you, or you go to Gamblers Anonymous and you feel lost or whatever it may be, we can't go to A&E and say we need help or whatever. And 9 out of 10 gamblers who have problems contemplate suicide because they feel that's the only road out. It's the only way that they see can remove themselves from the problem. And that's where a lot of people end up. And sadly, 1 or 2 people a day will commit suicide because of a gambling addiction. And the people behind us, there's thousands and millions of people who are gambling there and probably don't realise that the problems are still ahead of them or whatever, and raising awareness, and hopefully platforms like Streetcoins and the Alliance and Cope Scotland and all these other great wee charities that are kicking about, I really hope there is out there for people sometimes, and to get it on legislation, white papers, government to realise that we need to mention gambling along with drugs and alcohol, for instance, get it in the same conversation.
Yeah.
That's it.
I've got a comment here from Twitter from AidDub, at AidDub. He said, I attended a Bet You Can Help Now awareness session last week. Really good to start opening up the conversation. If you search the hashtag Bet You Can Help Now, and check out these Twitter accounts, BCT Northwest and the one you mentioned, Georgina, at RCA Trust. We've got an email here. I saw recently that Streetcoins have been running alcohol and drug recovery groups with Crossreach and Turning Point. I would suggest Streetcoins try and get funding to deliver some gambling specific groups. The bookmakers could easily pay for it. Well, if people are listening, that would be something that Streetcoins would be definitely up for. Comment here, research from GREO. This is an email comment. Research from GREO, the Gambling Research Exchange, found that 50% of individuals scoring as problem gamblers will commit a crime. This equates to 18,000 individuals in Scotland. And I suppose that's something we touched on before, but maybe Craig or Kirsty can come in and talk about this with your experience on a local level with Community Payback Order and the effect that you see gambling have on the people that you're dealing with on a day-to-day basis. Would you like to just talk a little bit about that, about the connection between your participants and the people that are your CPO clients and the effect gambling's having on them?
I guess for me, it's that wider impact it has on their lives altogether. When they lose all their money gambling, be that, earnings from wages or benefit money, it's gone very quickly. It could be within the course of a day, their money's gone. They then have to get through another 2 weeks perhaps until they get an X payment. How do they eat? How do they, do other things? It becomes a bit of a spiral for them, because they then would sometimes, and I'm not saying everybody, but there would be instances where some people would then feel the need to maybe steal food in order to feed themselves and their family. It can have such a wider impact that results in them coming back to the attention of the police, sometimes the courts, and then it just escalates and escalates till they have potentially several more orders, and it just becomes a bit of a spiral, because then they feel there's no way out of it. So yeah, it's a daily thing. It's not something that just happens and then it's okay after that, because it's not. It continues for a long time. It's very, very hard for them to get out of debt when that becomes deeper and deeper and higher and higher. There are services we can help link them to in terms of finances, to look at how best to cope with it, but it becomes so huge. It's it becomes that stigma thing that they don't want to talk about, because they don't know how to start talking about it and how to start dealing with it, and that has a massive impact. I think as a service, we're very good. The staff are very good at listening to what people have to say. When they want to talk, we just allow them to talk, and that is sometimes a starting point for them getting the right supports, by being able to listen to the story they want to tell. And it's really hard for them to do that, and we totally appreciate the honesty and the trauma that can cause people, but they're honest and coming forward and speaking to us about it, and then we can support them in whatever way we can. But it's a real difficulty for them.
Yeah. An extension of this question has been asked. Maybe Darren, you could come in on this one. Is Police Scotland aware that as many as 18,000 individuals in Scotland could be committing crimes as a result of problem gambling? And that question also that I just asked Kirsty, what proportion of your workload is gambling or debt as a result of gambling related?
I think that's a really good question to ask. I think firstly, 18,000, by anyone's stretch of imagination is a huge number nationally to be committing crime as a result of addiction. I did touch upon it earlier on. I think it is an area of work that we need to look at, and I think not only to understand the breadth of that problem that's been put forward, but also to ensure that when we are speaking, engaging, dealing with people who have potentially committed a crime as a result of the addiction, that we're seeing them through to support. And that's something I'm really keen on. And if I just come back a wee bit slightly to the point that Kirsty, Craig, Martin, Georgina have all made, and to get my opinion on this is, I think that gambling, listening to some of the testimony here today, is possibly the most harmful of the addictions that we know about, and I say that from the point of view is that it's hidden. Nobody's speaking about it just now, and absolutely the voice of Martin, Georgina out there is so important. But also, we're faced with a huge industry that absolutely wants to tell us that this is a lifestyle. It's a good lifestyle. You can be happy. You've got sports people on the TV and adverts selling the brand, selling the enjoyment it comes from. And I think it was Kirsty made the point. On the other hand, we've got very quiet media coming out from elsewhere to say it's a problem. So when you're faced with that, competing, there is no competition. But the other point I want to make is, for instance, if you had a substance use addiction or if you had an alcohol addiction, it's not so easy to access at times the substance or the alcohol. Whereas gambling, you can go online, a few clicks of a button, you're accessing the issue. Now, this is just my opinion. Maybe Georgina can come in after me and tell me if I'm right or wrong. And I'm speaking in part as a layperson through this. So, in answer to the question, I think we need to do more. And last week, as I said, police service will want to engage with Martin to learn more about how we can help on the front line.
Great. Thank you for that. Now, listen, we've got some other comments coming through that bear reading. Some of them very positive. Kathleen has emailed another brilliant 12-week module from Aberdeenshire and Streetcoins. Well done, everyone. It's been a privilege sitting in on these read-throughs and scripts. They're excellent, well written, well presented, and highlight some much important, often neglected issues. Well done to all. There is a lot of questions that are being emailed through that are very similar. So if we kind of group them together and ask the panels seem to be agreeing that gambling addiction should be treated the same way as alcohol, drugs, mental health issues, etc., as part of a community payback order. But who at the Scottish Government can make this change to CPOs? I suppose maybe that's when we start with you, Georgina, again. Is there a specific...
Yep. There actually has been increased recognition at Scottish Government. So I think at the start of this year, there became a policy team which is focusing on gambling and tobacco. And that's new within Scottish Government. That's a new position. Last year, 2021. So that's new. That's a new policy team, and it is a named remit sitting under the ministers in the health and social care. So that is very positive that that's happened. And what I would say is that sits under the health and social care Backit brand. I must say my knowledge within the sort of criminal justice and where that particular sort of ministerialship would sit is slightly different, but there is a named policy team. We have a sort of contact people with a named policy lead. So my instinct would be that that civil servant policy team would be the one to be going with gambling related research, with changes that should be happening. The people that we need to be speaking to and influencing and creating change for would be that policy team.
Okay, so that's somebody that we can contact at a local level as well. We can all reach our MSPs. Okay, well, listen, I would like to. Many of the comments are similar questions to those, and I think we've covered that. So I would just like to thank all of the panelists for coming along. Thank you to the Road to Change group who put this script together and over a 12-week period crafted it. Built it up out of nothing from a blank page and created something that was thought-provoking and got us all talking. So Martin Paterson, thank you for coming along. For anyone, I highly recommend watching their film, Martin's film, One Last Spin, and going to onelastspin.vision, where you can get all the information on the film and how you can help the crowdfunder and help get it out to a wider population. Georgina Charlton from Gambling Harms, thank you so much. Darren Bruce from Police Scotland, Craig McGrory, Kirsty Milne at Aberdeenshire Unpaid Work. If there is any other comments that any of you guys would like to make, now's a good time. Is anything you'd like to say finally in closing? No? Thumbs up, just as you're all confirming that. I never like to shut people down when they sometimes have a burning thing that they'd love to say.
Did that come out, Adam? Just a congratulations to Shaun, Ruben, and Neil, and for Lucky Lee. I thought it was brilliant, and I hope that they keep using their imagination, and there's other platforms available for them after this. And thanks for inviting Georgina and I to this conference, debate, whatever it may be called. But thank you.
Thanks, Martin. Really, really appreciate it. And as I said, I haven't said it enough, but your film is a highly, highly recommend it. And I suppose that's a good way to answer one of the questions that we touched on, how to start a conversation. I would share that film with somebody. I'd share it as widely as you can, social media, etc. And you never know who the ripple effect of somebody watching a film like that and how it may generate a conversation that could make the difference between, you know, someone taking their life or someone getting into even more debt or causing even more harm to themselves or the family. I highly recommend that film. One last spin. So for everyone watching, thanks for sending in your comments. Thanks for sending in your questions. Stay in touch with Streetcoins, the channel, YouTube. Switch on the updates when you subscribe to Streetcoins YouTube channel. Hit the subscribe button, and you can stay in touch with all of the films and all of the live streams and Q&As that we do. Streetcoins.org is where you can find all of our films as well, catalogued. We made a terrific film about community payback orders a couple of years back, and I highly recommend watching that and sharing it as well. So that's it. Thank you everyone for tuning in. Thanks again to all the panel, and we hope to see you again very soon with our next live stream. Okay.
1, 2, 3. I never want my children to live a life like mine, so I faced my inner demons, one small step at a time, one small step at a time. I was a boy without belonging, a jigsaw piece that didn't fit. If someone shouted out the answer, then you know I didn't hear it. You know I didn't hear it. I'm not the man, I'm not the man I used to be. Gone are the days when all I could see was myself in the mirror, trying to break free, trying to break free. It's taken many years of feeling all alone, so many years of emptiness with no place to call a home, no place to call a home. Now I'm feeling so much stronger as my demons walked away. I think they finally realized they had nothing more to say, nothing more to say. I'm not the man, I'm not the man I used to be. Gone are the days when all I could see was myself in the mirror, trying to break free, trying to break free. So many days have passed now, and my life is still on track. And if them demons try returning, I'll have the strength to send them back. I'll have the strength to send them back. They'll never pull me down again, or ever cause me pain. I can see a brighter future and it's heading in my way. It's growing brighter every day. I'm not the man, I'm not the man I used to be. I'm not the man, I'm not the man I used to be. Oh, I'm not the man, I'm not the man I used to be. Gone are the days when all I could see was myself in the mirror, trying to break free, but now I've broken